Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to the soft flickering glow of Victorian England, a place where insomnia wasn't just a nuisance, it was a fashionable affliction. Picture yourself wrapped in a quilt, heavy enough to pin a small mammal, lying in a four-poster bed that creaks like an old library door. Outside, fog curls around gas lamps. Inside, someone just spent 3 hours composing a poem about why they can't sleep. Yes, tonight's story is all about the strange, sometimes sweet and often slightly absurd things Victorians did to summon sleep. Spoiler, some of it involved vinegar, beeswax and reciting Latin backwards. You wouldn't have made it 2 nights, friend. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step quietly across a walnut floor that sighs beneath your feet. The year is 1871. You're in a guest room belonging to a woman named Millicent, who believes that dreams come easier if you line your socks with lavender. The wallpaper here is cream and faded rose, and smells ever so slightly like beeswax and forgotten cake. Somewhere in the distance, a grandfather clock ticks steadily, as if trying to soothe the restless with its slow, stubborn rhythm. You've come here because you can't sleep, and neither can Millicent. Luckily, this house is prepared. Insomnia in this household is treated like a gentleman caller. Greeted politely, offered tea, and slowly coaxed out the door. Millicent appears in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl the color of weak tea. She hands you a diary. Read this. She says, "You might dream of hedgehogs in waistcoats." You open it. The first entry is dated March 3, 1864, and begins with, "Couldn't sleep. Again. Considered eating raw turnip. Opted for reading psalms instead." Apparently, sleep was a nightly quest, and like any true Victorian endeavor, it had structure, rules, and a slightly judgmental tone. You curl into a chair by the fireplace. The pages go on. Experiments with cold baths at midnight, soft murmurs about the benefits of goose-down pillows infused with rosemary oil. One particularly intense entry details the application of chilled cabbage leaves to the forehead. Effective, she wrote, but alarmed the maid. Insomnia wasn't just personal. It was practically a social event. Entire magazines were devoted to night troubles. Tips included burning orange peels on the hearth, walking slowly backwards while whispering nursery rhymes, and placing a piece of iron under one's bed to ground the nerves. You hear a soft knock. It's Millicent again, this time with a tray. On it, warm milk, a small biscuit that looks like it regrets its existence, and a vial labeled Somnus Tincture. You raise an eyebrow. "Oh, it's just chamomile valerian. And a touch of laudanum," she says lightly, as though discussing jam. Victorians loved a gentle poison. If it made you drowsy, it was practically medicine. Laudanum, an opiate in a bottle, was as common as sugar cubes. Gentlewomen, poets, and even children used it. You, being a modern traveler, pretend to sip. And still, sleep didn't come easily. It was considered noble, almost romantic, to struggle with sleep. As if your soul was simply too occupied with higher thoughts to surrender to unconsciousness. Poets wrote verses like, "I courted slumber, yet she fled, on footsteps made of moonlight." Very dramatic, very damp. You glance at the clock. It's not even midnight. Somehow you find yourself pacing, a habit described in one medical journal as mental brushing. According to Dr. Willoughby Etheridge, a name that feels like a sneeze, walking in precise geometric shapes helped untangle dream threads. You try a square, then a triangle, then give up and sit in a velvet armchair that smells faintly of thyme and ink. The truth is, the Victorian obsession with sleep wasn't just about rest. It was about control. The Industrial Revolution had created a world ruled by clocks. Time was money, and sleep was scheduled like a business meeting. Losing sleep was not just tiring, it was inefficient, hence the rise of sleep manuals. Some serious, some bordering on performance art. One advised hanging a painting of sheep on the wall and counting their legs. Another swore by reciting the Kings of England in reverse order while holding your breath. You try it. Elizabeth, Henry, Edward. Oh no. Outside, a cat yowls like a fading trumpet solo. You blink slowly. The fire pops. Somewhere Millicent snores like a softly deflating balloon, and in this quiet moment, something settles in you. Not sleep, perhaps, but a warmth, a calm, a reminder that people have been battling the same stubborn mind for centuries. As you close the diary, one line catches your eye, scrawled in slanted ink. Tonight I tried to write a lullaby for myself. It was mostly about porridge. You smile, because somehow that's the most Victorian thing of all, and the clock ticks on. You lean further into the chair, its velvet arms worn smooth by years of elbows and teacups. The diary still rests in your lap, and Millicent's soft snores filter through the door like a very polite ghost, apologizing for being noisy. Your eyes drift to the pillow she left on the settee nearby, squat, oddly dense and stitched with what appears to be the words, "Sleep, thou art elusive, yet embroidered." The thing smells like herbs and faint disappointment. You lift it curiously. It's heavier than expected. You give it a cautious squeeze and immediately regret that decision. There's something crunchy inside. You unzip the side seam and peek in. Moss. No, wait. Lavender, dried thyme, chamomile buds, and pine needles? Yes, this was a herbal sleep pillow, an invention deeply beloved by Victorians, who firmly believed that cramming a small botanical garden into a sack and pressing their faces against it would bring about slumber. You find a handwritten note tucked into the seam. For those who suffer nerves and night thoughts, a blend of field and forest may quiet the storm. A lovely sentiment, and also a fire hazard. You walk toward the vanity, where a smaller, round cushion sits proudly on the chair, embroidered with the word peace. This one smells aggressively of cloves and licorice root, as though it once dated a bottle of mulled wine and never got over the breakup. Victorian pillows weren't just for comfort, they were rituals in fabric form. You weren't supposed to just lie down. No, you prepared your sleep. The bed was your battlefield, the pillow your potion. There was a giddy enthusiasm in Victorian publications for sleep recipes. Stuff the pillow with marjoram and sweet woodruff. Sprinkle it with orange water and fold it thrice under the moon. Add hops and your dreams shall be of meadows. Some people even stuffed their pillows with shavings of sandalwood, or, and this is real, fragments of church pews. Holy wood, they believed, might inspire holy rest. You gently pat the pillow and wonder if anyone ever sneezed themselves awake mid-dream. Then you spot it. The neck pillow. Not the modern horseshoe kind, no. This looks like someone folded a very judgmental loaf of bread in half. It was designed to cradle the neck just so, because Victorians feared the consequences of improper spinal posture, even in unconsciousness. "Let not your head tilt, lest your thoughts spill," said one pamphlet from 1853. Comforting. And then there were the anti-snore pillows. One design instructed sleepers to balance their head at a slight incline, using stacked cushions and a strap under the chin. You try to imagine anyone actually managing to fall asleep like that. You suspect most people gave up and accepted their snoring fate, possibly blaming it on spirits or indigestion. As you settle back into your chair, the fire gives a sigh and the flames dim lower. You tuck the odd herbal pillow under your arm, and for a brief second it feels like hugging a fragrant hedgehog. And yet, you're beginning to understand. It wasn't that Victorians expected these pillows to magically cure insomnia. It was the ritual that mattered. The gathering of ingredients, the stitching of fabric, the belief that you were actively doing something to woo sleep back into your life. There's something soothing about the slow intentionality of it. Not scrolling, not tapping, just herbs, fabric, time. You look out the small rounded window at the street below. A lamplighter wanders past, his silhouette tall and wobbly in the fog. He tips his cap, though he probably can't see you. You imagine his pillow is filled with something manlier, like tobacco leaves and existential dread. In the diary, Millicent had listed her top 5 pillow fillers: lavender chamomile dried, rose petals crushed mint, not too much, cotton soaked in orange flower water. You notice she had crossed out a 6th item, onion peels. A single word written next to it in all caps: never. There are even stories, half rumor, half advertisement, of enterprising Victorian housewives who sold custom dream pillows with personalized scents. Some included tiny sachets of sea salt, believing the scent of the ocean helped recall peaceful childhoods. Others believed in iron filings for strength of mind, which frankly seems like a good way to fall asleep and wake up magnetic. And let's not forget the pillow. Prayers, embroidered on cloth, muttered under breath, or simply thought in rhythm with one's pulse. Let the dark be deep, let my soul not weep. Let me wake in light, free of worry, free of night. You hear a creak. Millicent again. She peeks in, holding a pillow shaped like a crescent moon. This one, she whispers, has lemon balm and a single feather from a goose that allegedly nested on a church roof. You blink. It helps me dream of summer, she adds, and leaves it beside you. You're not sure it does anything, but you hold it anyway. The scent is clean, almost like soap left out in the sun, and as your eyes flutter slightly, your head tipping just an inch, you think, Victorians may have been a little eccentric, but perhaps, in their careful pillow stuffing, they knew something we've forgotten. The fire hums, the fog thickens, and the diary remains open, ready to tell you more. The diary's spine creaks slightly as you flip to the next page, and a brittle scrap of paper slips out. A leaflet, really, pale green and edged with faded gold ink. It reads, "The Gentleman's Bedtime Elixir, Tonic for a Weary Mind." The ingredients list includes laudanum, but of course tincture of valerian spirit of ammonia. Yikes. A cordial of orange peel and burnt sugar. You pause at the word ammonia. It's one thing to chase sleep, another to surprise it with a chemical slap in the face. But this was no isolated oddity. The Victorians were veritable connoisseurs of sleep tonics, from the borderline delicious to the truly unhinged. Every town had its local apothecary, with a signature sleep draught, most of which promised rest, clarity, and fewer hysterical outbursts in front of company. You read further. The leaflet recommends a teaspoon taken nightly with warm milk and gentle thoughts. You're not sure which part was more dangerous, the laudanum or the expectation of gentle thoughts in 1884. On the opposite page, Millicent had pasted a newspaper clipping, "A Housewife's Guide to Soothing Syrups." Among the remedies, cherry bark tea for those troubled by wandering dreams, lettuce water for nightmares caused by indigestion or guilt, poppy syrup for teething children and philosophical husbands. The poppy syrup is underlined 3 times. You suspect Millicent had strong feelings about philosophical husbands. You glance toward the nearby cabinet, curious. It's stocked with dusty bottles, some labeled in neat script: hops extract, tincture of skullcap, elixir of peace. You open one carefully. The smell is floral and faintly metallic, like a forgotten candy wrapper at the bottom of a drawer in Versailles. Victorians didn't just drink their way to sleep. They dabbed, steamed, and even inhaled their sedatives. There were tiny sleep pastilles sold in round tins, designed to melt on the tongue with the subtlety of a mentholated ghost. If that didn't work, one could resort to chloroform on a handkerchief, though doctors occasionally frowned upon this, usually after someone accidentally fell asleep for 3 days straight. Millicent's diary describes her own sleep tincture. "I take 3 drops of valerian with elderflower syrup and a whisper of sherry. The trick is to sip it under moonlight and never tell Henry how strong it is." You admire her restraint. And then there was the famous Snore No More syrup, sold in little cobalt bottles shaped like a bishop. It claimed to silence the most thunderous of nasal violins. Reviews were mixed. One man wrote to the paper saying, "My wife now hears only silence and suspects I have died. A great improvement to our marriage." Further down the diary, pressed, flat and lovingly preserved, is a recipe: Millicent's restorative milk, 1 cup warm milk, a single clove, pinch of nutmeg, 2 teaspoons honey, whisper something you miss into the cup before sipping. No sedatives. No opium. Just warmth, spice, and maybe a touch of emotional surrender. You make a mental note to try it. Your fingers brush over a folded napkin tucked at the back of the cabinet. Unfolding it reveals a childish scrawl. "Mum says I must drink. My sleepy milk or the dreams won't come." You imagine some weary Victorian mother boiling milk by candlelight while her son refuses to sleep until he's properly bribed with nutmeg and nighttime lies. It wasn't all tonics and tinctures, though. Victorians loved their bedtime rituals. There were proper rules. You didn't just throw on pajamas and call it a day. No, you followed an evening routine fit for royalty. Brush hair, 50 strokes, change into linen nightdress, crisp, white and modest to the point of invisibility. Apply cold cream, sprinkle the bed linens with rosewater, say a prayer. Say another prayer in case the first one didn't cover everything. Then sip your elixir. It was sleep as ceremony. The bedroom was more than a room. It was a sanctuary of control in an unpredictable world. The curtains were drawn just so. The slippers faced the right direction, and the lamp was turned low to ease the nervous system. You shift in your chair and glance at the candle now flickering low beside you. It's not unlike what you're doing now, really. Winding. Down through repetition, through quiet thoughts, through the low drone of time unspooling gently. Somewhere a clock chimes one lonely bell. Just one. You wonder what time it was when Millicent wrote her last entry on this page. Slept better tonight. Fewer dreams of the blue dog. I think the nutmeg helps. You chuckle softly. You're not sure what the blue dog was, but if nutmeg kept it away, well, more power to her. The fire flickers. The diary waits. And you, somewhere between the scent of clove and old paper, begin to feel something ancient stirring in your bones. A kind of trust, maybe, that even in a world of wild cures and dreamless nights, someone once believed in soft drinks, whispered hopes and the healing power of warm milk. The next page in the diary begins with a curious ink blot, dark, feathery at the edges, like someone had paused too long with their pen hovering mid-thought. Beneath it, in looping script, tonight, I try the feather method. God help me if it tickles. You tilt your head. The feather method. Turns out this was not some poetic metaphor. Victorians, bless them, had an unshakable faith in the power of tactile sleep aids. Some households swore by brushing the soles of the feet with a goose feather dipped in lavender oil, gently, rhythmically, like coaxing a cat into purring. It was meant to soothe the nerves through sensory lull. You imagine the scene. A rigid Victorian gentleman in a velvet robe, lying stiffly in bed, while his maid applies feathered strokes to his ankles like a human harp. It's either deeply calming or the start of an awkward novel. Millicent writes, I lasted 37 strokes, laughed so hard I woke the dog. Will attempt again tomorrow with socks on. This feather practice was part of a broader Victorian fascination with contact therapy. Not just massages, but strange little touches designed to stimulate or sedate. There were brushes made of horsehair to lightly punish the skin into relaxation, or rubber rollers one could drag across the spine. And if that failed, there was always electricity. Yes, electricity. You spot a folded advertisement pressed against the back of the diary. The illustration shows a very uncomfortable-looking woman sitting stiffly in a parlor chair, with wires running from her wrists to a handsome wooden box. The headline, The Modern Sleep, Galvanic Stimulation for a Nightly Rest. According to the text, this soothing charge mimicked the body's own electrical current. It was described as no more disturbing than a bee's sigh, though one customer apparently wrote in to say, it made my ears ring until Whitsun. Millicent's review is less charitable. Tested the galvanic bonnet. Hair smelled like toast. Dreams unremarkable. You lean back and exhale, the flickering candle casting a sleepy halo on the diary page. You wonder how much of Victorian sleep culture was about actual results, and how much was just the ritual, the sense that doing something, no matter how odd, might summon rest like a loyal servant. This thought is confirmed when you find a tucked-in list titled My Sleep Etiquette, written in Millicent's script. Do not quarrel after supper. Brush hair facing east. Close all drawers and doors. Spirits dislike clutter. Sleep in linen, never flannel. Encourages damp thinking. A pinch of salt under the pillow keeps away undesirable dreams. You smile. Rule number 5 has a tiny drawing of a ghost in a top hat. Outside, a breeze tugs at the curtains. You can hear the wind teasing the ivy across the window panes. It sounds like a tired orchestra warming up. Millicent mentions the sleeper's clock, a peculiar timepiece marketed to light sleepers. It didn't tick. Instead, it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat through a cotton strap you tied to your wrist. The rhythm was meant to lull the nervous system into mimicking it. The problem? It sometimes startled wearers awake when it forgot its own beat and suddenly pulsed like a sprinting greyhound. Even so, it was widely praised, mostly because it was quieter than husbands snoring or the gas lamps hissing at odd hours. You can't help but admire the sheer theatricality of it all. Sleep wasn't just something you fell into. It was something you performed. There were bedtime gowns with lace sleeves so long they trailed like angel wings. There were slippers made of velvet that you only wore from bedroom to bed. One etiquette book even recommended: if you must dream, let it be something becoming. The section ends with a diary entry, written sideways, as if she was too tired to turn the page. The feather is locked in the drawer. I shan't be tickled again. We'll try warm stones tomorrow. Henry says I'm slowly turning into a small oven. You chuckle again, nearly ready to close the book for the night, but the next line catches your eye. But the cat slept beside me, and I dreamed of nothing at all. No visions, no blue dogs, no strange electrical hats. Just a soft weight by the leg and silence behind the eyes. You sigh. That's the dream, isn't it? No tinctures, no rituals. Just a warm presence and the absence of thought. Outside, the wind eases. You think about brushing your own feet with a feather, but then remember how ticklish you are and decide instead to imagine it. A feather, slow and soft across your skin, like someone dusting away the rest of the world, gently, rhythmically, until there's nothing left but sleep. The page that follows is faintly perfumed, as though someone once spilled lavender water across the bottom edge. It curls slightly at the corner, where a wax seal, broken long ago, clings to a folded insert. Millicent had labelled this one: "The sleep chair and the art of sitting until sleep arrives." You raise an eyebrow. Apparently, in some corners of Victorian domestic life, beds were considered too luxurious, too indulgent, even too horizontal. A particular class of refined insomniacs took pride in nodding off upright in elaborately carved sleep chairs, wingback thrones with horsehair cushions, and sometimes, if they were very fancy, velvet straps to hold your head in place so it wouldn't loll ungracefully. You imagine it now, you in your own home, strapping your own head to your own chair, whispering, "Ah, yes, comfort achieved." Millicent writes, "Aunt Beatrice insists it improves the circulation of dreams. I suspect it's more about her unwillingness to change the bedsheets." Victorians did not take sleeping lying down, at least not all the time. Some believed vertical sleeping kept the soul anchored to the body. Lying flat, they warned, made it easier for the spirits to slip out, and for other things to slip in, hence the rise of semi-supine sleeping positions and guardian dolls perched on mantles to keep watch through the night. You glance at a porcelain figure nestled in a shadowed corner of the cabinet. Glassy eyes, permanent half-smile, guardian or sleep hazard, hard to say. Back in the diary, there's a list headed, "Chair sleeping do's and don'ts." Do: recline no more than 32 degrees. Anything beyond invites nightmares and scandal. Don't: drink tea while in the chair, you will spill it. Do: use a lap blanket heavy enough to discourage escape. Don't: let the dog up, it will win. You trace the page, amused. There's a drawing in the margin. Millicent herself fast asleep in a high-backed chair, her cat smugly perched on her head like a very small, very judgmental hat. There's something about this that resonates with you, the stubbornness of it, the deliberate refusal to surrender, the idea that if you just sat very still in the right posture, with the right blanket and a mug of milk, sleep would eventually give in and come to you. It's a bit like romance, really. If you try too hard, you look desperate. If you ignore, it sulks. But if you act vaguely uninterested and very well dressed, it might just appear, pretending it had other plans anyway. Millicent, it seems, eventually upgraded to a full sleep nook. She describes it: a window alcove with a curved bench, 3 pillows, stuffed with lavender, buckwheat and quiet hopes, a candle that smells of old books, and a blanket Henry is not allowed to borrow. You like the sound of that, especially the part about quiet hopes. She even includes a small inventory: 1 sachet of dried rose petals tied with blue thread, a jar of wind chimes, For dreaming about the sea, one deeply unnecessary monocle. In case I must wake up looking. Important. Victorians loved objects that didn't strictly do anything but were said to help. Like dreamstones, little river pebbles you warmed in your palms before bed to encourage grounded slumber. Or sleep bells, which you didn't ring, but merely placed nearby because their presence encouraged internal stillness. Some people even kept slices of bread in their slippers overnight, to absorb bad dreams, apparently. Or at least to keep your feet occupied with questions. You imagine going to bed tonight with a rock in one hand, a monocle in the other, a piece of rye in your shoe, and a vague sense of superiority. Victorian chic. Back in the diary, Millicent. Records. Tonight I tried the Nook, but Henry snored in the key of G. Will attempt earplugs tomorrow. Or wax. Or vengeance. You snort softly. Even in the most elegant of rituals, there were disruptions. She tried again the next night, alone, in her sleep chair watching moonlight crawl across the rug, and it worked. I drifted off during the 3rd chapter of The Moral Failures of Goats, and dreamt of an orchard, where no one expected anything from me. You close your eyes at the image, an orchard of peace, no expectations, just air and leaf shadow, and maybe a bench someone forgot to claim. You stay there for a moment, just your breath and the quiet tick of time. It's a reminder, sometimes the most powerful thing isn't the potion or the chair or the feather. Sometimes it's simply the permission to rest. Tonight the air feels heavier, like the room has curled inward listening with you. Outside the window, the wind has taken a break, and the trees are holding their breath. You flip the diary open again and find Millicent's smallest handwriting. Yet, it runs diagonally across the page, clearly scribbled in low light. Tested the garden tonic. Mixed results. Henry turned purple. Your eyebrows raise. Garden tonic? This part of the diary explores the lush and leafy world of Victorian herbal remedies for sleep. A rabbit hole of simmered roots, questionable, teas and concoctions so earthy they may have included actual dirt. Let's start with the basics. Chamomile? Obvious. Lavender? Of course. But the Victorians didn't stop there. They loved to add flair, complexity, and just a whisper of danger. Millicent's favorite blend, it seems, was a nightly infusion she called the Forgetting Cup. The recipe, 2 sprigs of lemon balm for calmness of the elbows, whatever. That means 1 dried poppy petal, symbolic mostly. It floated like a melancholic boat. A spoonful of warmed honey, stirred counterclockwise, and exactly 3 drops of valerian tincture. No more, unless you enjoy the sensation of melting into your nightgown. You picture her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, whispering spells over a saucepan while Henry watches from the hallway with a damp towel and a fire extinguisher. Some Victorians believed the direction in which you stirred your tea influenced its energy. Clockwise brought memory and alertness. Counterclockwise encouraged release of thoughts, regrets, and that one embarrassing thing you said in 1843. Millicent writes, I drank the whole cup and fell asleep mid-sentence. Woke up with ink on my nose and a dream about silent violins. But not all tonics were so forgiving. Enter lettuce soup. Yes, boiled lettuce, served warm. It was considered one of the most effective natural sedatives of the era. Doctors prescribed it with such confidence that it briefly became known as the laudanum of vegetables. Millicent gave it a try. The smell was green, the texture more philosophical than edible, but I must admit, I don't remember climbing into bed. You can almost smell it, that bitter, leafy tang. You wonder if people genuinely believed in the power of boiled lettuce, or if they simply passed out from the culinary trauma. There's also mention of hop pillows, small sacks filled with dried hops, tucked beneath the pillowcase. Supposedly, the scent lulled one into dreams. Unfortunately, hops also smell faintly like old beer and regret. Millicent tried this too. Hop pillow acquired. Smells like Henry's shirt after Tuesdays. Slept surprisingly well, possibly from low expectations. You smile, eyes soft. There's something delightfully human about her trials, the mixture of earnest effort and barely restrained skepticism. But here's where it gets strange. She describes one neighbor's obsession with belladonna water, a few drops under the tongue, and the world would allegedly blur into soft velvet. Of course, it was also highly toxic. Mrs. Withers insists she's never felt so peaceful. She's also mistaken her umbrella for a fiancé. Jury's out. The Victorians lived on the edge of logic and mysticism. Every herb had a personality. Every root had an opinion. They catalogued plants like they were gossiping about them. Oh, valerian, bit dramatic, always needs to be the center of the potion. And yet, despite the over-the-top rituals and fragrant chaos, there's something comforting in the intent. The belief that sleep could be summoned from the earth, coaxed out of petals, and pulp and boiled stems. That nature itself might want you to rest. You glance toward your own kitchen and wonder, how many sprigs of lemon balm do you even own? There's a drawing in the margin, a little teacup, smiling with legs crossed, as if it too is dozing off, and below that Millicent's quietest line yet. The garden doesn't mind if you whisper. It just listens and dreams with you. You close your eyes and imagine it, a moonlit greenhouse, shelves of drying herbs, a kettle humming in the distance, and you, wrapped in a shawl, sipping something floral and slightly suspicious. Somewhere, behind you a fox yawns. Sleep, after all, might not be found in silence, but in the soft rustle of leaves, the drip of water from a tin spout, and the distant hum of plants remembering the sun. You find yourself drifting further into the Victorian night, a world where every sigh, every whisper of a curtain seems charged with purpose. And of course, with just a hint of melodrama. The year is 1885 now, and the obsession with sleep has taken a peculiar turn, crossing the boundaries from medicine into the realm of the paranormal. Millicent's diary entries reveal that by this time, restless nights were often blamed on unseen forces, spirits, curses, and the odd evil eye. You imagine sitting beside her in the flickering candlelight, listening as she recounts tales of neighbors who swore their insomnia was caused by a jealous ghost or a neighbor's bad intentions. One such story tells of Mrs. Penelope Fairweather, who claimed her sleeplessness was due to a hex placed by a rival embroiderer. Her cure, sleeping with a sprig of rue under her pillow, an herb said to ward off bad luck and, conveniently, anyone with a questionable sense of smell. The Victorian era was famous for its spiritualism craze, and séances were as common as tea parties. Many believed that spirits could whisper secrets or disturb your dreams, making peaceful slumber impossible. Some sleep manuals even advised placing a mirror facing the bed to reflect restless spirits back to their realm. You chuckle softly, imagining poor Millicent trying this, only to wake herself in the middle of the night from seeing her own reflection suddenly looming out of the darkness. Interestingly, some Victorians embraced these ghostly disturbances, seeing sleeplessness as a sign of heightened sensitivity, a badge of honor among artists and thinkers. The very act of being unable to sleep was romanticized as a doorway to the supernatural. But not everyone was so poetic. The era's medical community was divided. Some doctors warned against superstition, emphasizing instead the importance of physical remedies. Others believed that sleep troubles were indeed linked to spiritual imbalance, recommending rituals that combined herbal baths with the chanting of ancient verses. One particularly curious recommendation involved a ritual bath infused with crushed lavender, rose petals, and a pinch of salt, accompanied by the recitation of the Lord's Prayer backwards, an odd mix of the sacred and the mysterious. Millicent was skeptical, but gave it a try. Her diary notes, "I emerged smelling faintly of floral vinegar and confusion. Sleep was fleeting, but the cats seemed impressed. Despite the seriousness with which many approached sleep and its disturbances, the Victorians never lost their penchant for theatrics. From ghostly hexes to the swirling smoke of incense, meant to cleanse the night, the battle for rest was as much about belief and ritual as about biology. In fact, this blend of science and superstition created a rich tapestry of sleep culture. One that left a legacy of peculiar advice and charming oddities. As you tuck yourself deeper under the imaginary heavy quilt, you hear the distant toll of a bell marking the late hour. Outside, the gas lamps flicker in the fog, shadows dancing like restless spirits themselves. You realize that whether by science, superstition, or sheer will, the Victorians were united in their quest for sleep, battling the same silent enemy. You face tonight. And maybe, just maybe, there's comfort in that. Now close your eyes gently. Imagine the lavender sachets lining Millicent's socks, the faint scent of beeswax candles, and the slow, steady tick of the grandfather clock. Let these whispers of the past lull you toward your own restful slumber. You awake, or rather you imagine waking, in a small, warmly lit Victorian bedroom where the morning sun filters through lace curtains like a soft promise. The year is 1892, and with the dawn comes a fresh wave of remedies designed to tame the sleepless mind. The Victorians, ever the innovators, were now experimenting with newfangled inventions alongside their herbal potions and whispered prayers. Millicent's diary reveals her fascination with a curious contraption called the electrical sleeping belt. This device, part science and part spectacle, promised to soothe the nerves by gently vibrating or applying mild electric shocks, because nothing says calm quite like a little zap to the abdomen. You smile, imagining Millicent fastening this belt around her waist, with the hope that modern electricity might finally outwit her restless nights. The Victorians were captivated by electricity's promise to revolutionize health, but their understanding was often a blend of hopeful science and wild speculation. Doctors prescribed electrotherapy for everything from headaches to sleeplessness, and patients lined up to experience the strange buzzing sensations. Millicent notes with a mix of skepticism and amusement that the belt was less of a lullaby and more of a morning rooster's wake-up call. Alongside these gadgets, the era embraced the ritual of sleepy teas with renewed vigor. Chamomile remained the queen, but blends now included valerian root, hops, and even a pinch of mint. You imagine the soft clinking of porcelain cups and the faint scent of herbs swirling in the air, a gentle orchestra of flavors meant to coax the mind away from its anxious chatter. Yet despite all these efforts, insomnia persisted as a silent companion to many. Millicent writes of restless nights spent listening to the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the occasional bark of a neighborhood dog, noisy reminders that the world outside rarely slept. And then there was the curious trend of sleep salons. These dimly lit parlors, often decorated with plush cushions and scented oils, invited guests to recline and engage in quiet conversation, gentle music, or guided meditation-like exercises. The idea was simple: create a sanctuary away from the stresses of daily life to encourage restful repose. A bit like a Victorian spa day, but with fewer cucumber slices and more earnest nodding. You can't help but picture Millicent settling into one of these salons, perhaps with a faint smile as she watches the polite Victorian crowd attempting to relax amidst the polite clinking of teaspoons. Interestingly, the period also saw a rise in prescription rest. Wealthier Victorians could afford to retreat to country homes or seaside resorts, where doctors prescribed strict regimens of rest, fresh air, and gentle activity. The idea was to reset the body's natural rhythms, away from the smog and noise of burgeoning industrial cities. As you imagine this calm retreat, it's easy to feel the difference between the roaring factories of London and the soft crash of waves on a remote beach. Millicent's diary ends this section with a hopeful note. Tonight I place my faith in steam-powered dreams and the hum of distant trains. Perhaps tomorrow will bring the sleep that eludes me now. You close your eyes and imagine the gentle vibration of that electrical belt, the herbal warmth of a sleepy tea, and the hush of a sleep salon. Maybe, like Millicent, you're just one quiet innovation away from sweet slumber. The clock ticks on, and the Victorian night continues its slow dance toward dawn. The soft creak of the four-poster bed frame welcomes you back as you settle into the dimly lit room, the air tinged with the faint scent of lavender and old paper. The year is 1898, and Victorian England is on the cusp of a new century, yet the age-old quest for sleep remains as restless as ever. Millicent's diary reveals her newest experiment, the curious art of bedtime storytelling, but not the kind you might expect. Instead of fairy tales or moral fables, Victorians favoured something called historical reveries, slow, gentle tales of ancient times meant to lull the listener's mind into a peaceful haze. You imagine Millicent reclining by a flickering candle, softly recounting tales of the Silk Road caravans, the peaceful villages of the Edo period, or the dusty marketplaces of Timbuktu. The charm was in the detail, the rhythmic cadence of words painting scenes that were familiar, yet distant enough to distract from the anxieties of the present. Interestingly, the Victorians believed that such stories worked best when told without passion or drama. Monotone was the magic word. This slow, measured storytelling was thought to ease the mind into a state of restful disengagement, much like today's ASMR videos, but with a quill and ink instead of a microphone. You pause, reflecting on how much of our modern relaxation content is just a reinvention of Victorian wisdom, albeit with fewer corsets and more wireless headphones. But it wasn't all gentle tales. Millicent also notes a more peculiar method: whispered recitations of Latin prayers backwards. The practice was supposed to distract the mind from sleeplessness by focusing attention on something oddly challenging, yet soothingly rhythmic. Historians still debate whether this was effective or simply an elaborate Victorian placebo. You chuckle quietly, thinking that if whispered Latin backwards was good enough for Millicent, perhaps it can help you too. The diary entries also mention the role of scent, a vital component of Victorian sleep rituals. Lavender sachets, rosewater sprays, and even crushed violets stuffed beneath pillows were commonplace. The Victorians took their aromas seriously, believing that the right smell could transport the mind to tranquil gardens and distant meadows. You breathe in deeply, imagining the delicate floral perfume mingling with the warm wooden tones of the room. A soft scratch at the door breaks your reverie. Millicent returns, this time holding a small box labelled Dream Dust. She explains that it's a blend of crushed hops, chamomile, and a pinch of something secret, perhaps a touch of magic or simply an old family recipe. You watch as she sprinkles a bit on the bedside table, a faint haze rising like morning mist. Sleep still seems elusive, but the hope, the rituals, and the shared humanity of these efforts bring a gentle smile. You let the stories and scents wash over you, feeling yourself float closer to the calm, sure of rest. And as the candle flickers lower, you hear once again the steady tick of the grandfather clock, patient, unhurried, and perfectly content to keep time for those willing to listen. The early morning light filters through heavy velvet curtains, casting long, lazy shadows across the room. It's 1905 now, and the world outside is quickening with the hum of trains and the rattle of streetcars, but inside Millicent's sanctuary, time flows more gently, measured by the slow breath of evening rituals. Tonight's diary entry reveals the latest Victorian invention aimed at combating sleeplessness: the electric sleep lamp. Though the electric light was still a novelty, for many, a few daring souls believed that soft-colored illumination could coax the brain into relaxation. Blue was the favored hue, cool and calming, like dipping your thoughts into a quiet pond. You picture Millicent adjusting the dial on a small humming box beside her bed, watching as the room fills with a gentle sapphire glow. It's a stark contrast to the harsh gas lamps you remember from earlier nights, and the effect seems almost magical. Curiously, some doctors of the time warned against bright lights before bed, fearing they would overstimulate the dream glands. The term might sound strange now, but back then the science of sleep was still tangled in mystery and myth. Even so, the allure of a softly glowing room captured many imaginations. Millicent's diary describes the feeling as like being cradled by the sea at dusk, a poetic image that makes you wish you could experience it yourself. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Victorian society, sleep remedies grew even more inventive and sometimes downright whimsical. There were pillows stuffed with the down of nightingales, believed to carry the bird's serene song into dreams, or sleep bands, delicate ribbons tied around the wrist, infused with tiny amounts of sedative herbs. You can't help but smile at how many of these devices echo today's wearable tech and aromatherapy trends. Humans, it seems, have always been on a quest to hack their own biology. Millicent confesses that despite all these inventions and rituals, the true secret to sleep remained elusive. Some nights the mind was too busy racing, On others, the body simply refused to surrender. She writes of a neighbor who swore by dream pillows sewn from silk and filled with the crushed leaves of valerian root, its scent supposed to lull even the most stubborn insomniac. You wonder if you'd find the fragrance comforting or just ticklish. The diary closes with a wistful note. Perhaps sleep is less about force and more about kindness to oneself. You nod quietly, feeling a connection across time. As you lie back, bathed in the gentle glow of the imaginary electric lamp, you realize the Victorians' strange, beautiful attempts to find peace in the night weren't so different from your own. And with that thought, you drift closer to the quiet edge of dreams, where all the gentle rituals of history blend softly into the dark. The velvet night thickens outside Millicent's window, and the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages fades into a soft, rhythmic lullaby. It's the dawn of 1910, and the Victorian age has given way to Edwardian elegance. But the quest for peaceful sleep lingers on like an old friend. You notice that Millicent's diary entries have taken a curious turn, a new fascination with sound. Not just silence, but the deliberate crafting of noises meant to soothe or distract the restless mind. Enter the Sleep Symphony, a collection of gentle sounds, whispering leaves, distant church bells, even the faint murmur of a brook, recorded on wax cylinders for personal relaxation. It sounds rather like a Victorian Spotify playlist, only with more crackles and occasional hiss. You imagine Millicent setting the gramophone needle down, letting the soft crackle fill the room as she nestles beneath her quilt. Oddly enough, the science of sound therapy was still in its infancy. Some doctors theorized that carefully chosen noises could massage the nervous system, a phrase that feels both poetic and medically vague. You smile, recalling the modern craze for white noise machines and ASMR videos. Humans really do have a timeless appetite for gentle soundscapes, but the diary also mentions a less tranquil practice, the snore club. Apparently, some Victorian and Edwardian gentlemen would gather to compare their snoring styles, discussing who had the most musical or thunderous snores. It's a reminder that sleep, for all its quiet mystery, was still very much a social affair. Millicent muses that the snore club's popularity might stem from the same desire to feel connected in the long, dark hours. After all, loneliness has a way of turning even the most mundane sounds into comfort. You lean back and think about the sounds around you, perhaps the distant hum of a fan, the soft rustle of curtains, and how they weave a subtle cocoon of calm. The night deepens and the diary closes with a whimsical poem Millicent penned herself. In dreams, I sail on whispering seas, while snoring lords debate with ease. May gentle sounds and moonlight beams carry us softly into dreams. You smile, knowing that across time, in the quiet companionship of night, we all share the same lullabies. The hours slip by like molasses, slow and sweet, as Millicent's diary guides you deeper into the peculiar remedies of the late Victorian and Edwardian eras. You notice a curious pattern emerging, a growing fascination with the senses, especially smell. There's a detailed entry about the aromatic sleep cabinet, a small wooden box lined with velvet and filled with tiny vials of scents, lavender, bergamot, sandalwood, and even something called night jasmine. Victorians believed these fragrances could coax the mind into surrender, gently pulling it away from worries and into restful slumber. It reminds you of modern aromatherapy, but with a distinctly old-world flair. No sleek diffusers here, just carefully bottled essences passed from hand to hand like secret potions. Millicent describes her own experiment with a homemade sachet, sewn from lace and stuffed with dried herbs. She would place it under her pillow, sometimes swapping out the herbs depending on the season or her mood. One winter's night, she wrote that the scent of pine needles mingled with burning peat reminded her of cozy firesides and peaceful forests. The diary also reveals a lesser-known Victorian practice, sleep masks, made not of silk or velvet, but of thin, breathable paper, infused with calming oils. They were said to block out the disruptive gaslight and street noise, an early ancestor of our modern blackout masks. Interestingly, some doctors warned against overuse, fearing that, too, much scent might confuse the brain's natural rhythms. Historians still debate whether this was genuine medical concern or just a convenient excuse to curb expensive habits. You imagine Millicent donning her delicate mask, settling into her feather bed, the soft scent of herbs wrapping around her. Like a gentle hug, there's a comforting simplicity to these rituals. Despite all the odd ingredients and elaborate procedures, the core idea remains: to create a peaceful cocoon for the mind and body, a little sanctuary where the chaos of daily life could finally fade. You catch yourself taking a slow breath as, half inhaling the faint aroma of lavender yourself. Outside, the night sky stretches vast and quiet, dotted with stars that have watched countless insomniacs try every trick in the book to find rest. And somewhere, in that vastness, Millicent dreams, quietly of pine forests and whispered lullabies. The pages turn and you find yourself drifting into the early 20th century, where electricity begins to hum softly in Victorian bedrooms, and a new wave of sleep aids trickles in with it. Millicent's diary notes a shift from quaint herbal sachets and paper masks to electrically powered devices that promise to zap away sleeplessness. It's the age of electric sleep therapy, a phrase that sounds both futuristic and faintly alarming. You can almost see her skepticism as she writes about these newfangled contraptions, little machines emitting gentle pulses of electricity, meant to soothe the nerves. One entry describes a sleep helmet wired with copper coils, said to lull the brain into a restful state. The device looks more like a medieval torture helmet than a remedy, and you imagine poor Millicent donning it while trying not to think about the sparks flying. Doctors at the time were divided. Some swore by the calming effects, others warned that it was little more than expensive quackery. As always, historians argue about how widespread these devices really were, whether they were cutting-edge therapy or just Victorian gadgetry gone wild. Alongside these electric dreams, Millicent also records a surprising turn back to nature. The night garden. In response to the artificial glow of gas lamps and early electric lights, some Victorians cultivated moonlit gardens designed to encourage relaxation. These gardens featured pale flowers that released scent only at night and soft pathways lined with smooth stones for barefoot evening strolls. You imagine Millicent stepping quietly into such a garden, the cool grass beneath her slippers and the scent of jasmine curling around her like a lullaby. It's almost poetic, technology and nature waltzing in the dance for sleep. The diary's last notes from this era mention a curious social trend. Sleep salons, places where people could rent cozy nooks or beds for an afternoon nap. Think of it as the Victorian version of a modern-day nap cafe, but with more corsets and polite conversation. As you close this chapter of the diary, you feel a gentle current of connection. The same restlessness that drove these experiments still hums quietly within you. And despite the helmets and herbs, the softly glowing lamps and whispered nursery rhymes, the human quest for peaceful sleep remains timeless. The clock ticks softly. Somewhere, Millicent's house exhales in slumber. The diary now takes you into the quieter moments of the Victorian twilight years, where sleep remedies grow subtler, gentler, almost like a whispered promise at the edge of consciousness. Millicent writes about dream journals becoming popular among her friends, little notebooks where one would record thoughts before bed, hoping that by emptying the mind, sleep might sneak in more easily. You picture her sitting by a dim oil lamp, pen in hand, scribbling down worries, hopes, or even the day's oddest moment, like that time her cat, Mr. Whiskers, chased his own tail so fiercely he ended up tangled in the curtains. Sleep, it seems, was as much about mental peace as physical comfort. Alongside journaling, a delicate new fashion in sleepwear appeared. Gowns woven from soft muslin and lightly scented with rosewater. These weren't just for comfort. They were believed to calm the nerves through gentle touch and fragrance. Millicent notes that some ladies insisted on sleeping with lavender sprigs tucked into their pillows, while others swore by chamomile tea steeped until dark as a comforting ritual. The Victorian sense of propriety even extended to bedtime conversations. Quiet, measured, often revolving around poetry or gentle anecdotes meant to lull, not excite. Loud debates and household squabbles were considered the enemy of good sleep. But here's a charming little secret tucked in the margins. Some Victorians kept sleep pets, small creatures like tame rabbits or canaries, believed to emit calming energies. Millicent's diary mentions her neighbour's canary, named Pip, whose soft morning song was said to chase away nightmares. Of course, historians debate whether these pets truly helped or were simply delightful companions in lonely nights. Either way, it's a sweet reminder that sometimes comfort comes from the smallest sources. You stretch slightly, feeling the gentle weight of the night settling around you like a soft blanket. In these final pages before the diary closes, you find a recurring thought that sleep, no matter how elusive, is deeply personal, woven from habits, hopes, and the faint scent of familiar things. As the fire dims and your eyelids grow heavy, you can almost hear Millicent whispering, "Rest is a garden and we must tend it gently." And perhaps, dear friend, that's the most comforting remedy of all. The last pages of Millicent's diary unfold like a soft sigh, the final lullaby in a symphony of Victorian dreams and restless nights. The entries grow sparse, gentle reminders rather than frantic quests, as if she has finally learned that sleep cannot be chased, only invited. You sense a tender acceptance weaving through her words, like a slowly closing curtain on a well-loved stage. She writes of quiet evenings spent listening to the wind whisper through the lace curtains, the faint creak of the house settling into night, and the rhythmic pulse of her own breathing as a metronome for rest. The remedies become less about tricks and more about presence, a warm cup of tea, the embrace of a soft shawl, the comfort of knowing that tomorrow will come whether or not sleep arrives tonight. A particularly sweet note catches your eye. A recipe for a midnight porridge, thick and creamy, spiced with cinnamon and honey, meant to ease the body and mind. You imagine the warmth of that bowl in your hands, the gentle heaviness it leaves behind, coaxing your eyelids closed. Historians still debate whether these small rituals were more placebo or genuine cure. But as you sit here now, in this dimly lit room, you realize that the answer might not matter. What matters is the kindness shown to oneself in those quiet, shadowed moments. Millicent's final entry is a tender farewell to the night, a wish for sweet dreams and peaceful rest, a hope whispered across time to anyone who struggles with the same invisible battle. And now, as the clock ticks on and your breathing slows, let your thoughts drift softly, like clouds rolling across a twilight sky. Feel the gentle rhythm of night embrace you, the slow hush of the world folding into calm. Remember, sleep is less a destination and more a companion walking beside you, patient, quiet, and always nearby. So rest now, friend. Let your worries fall away like autumn leaves. The night holds you gently and tomorrow waits with open arms.